Welcome to episode 41 of Full Throttle, the Presidio Group's automotive industry podcast. I'm your host, Jason Stein, Director of Multimedia and Events at Presidio. On a regular basis, Full Throttle serves as the industry's meeting point for great conversations with leaders across the automotive world.
We've been very much getting back to the sort of, we always had this transparency, but because of the nature of the market, there wasn't as much discounting going on. There weren't those incentives. There weren't those rebates. So making sure we're communicating that information effectively and seamlessly in digital and physical worlds is really important. And making the ownership experience, we've been focused on this, and we've talked about this, Jason, with our app and some other things, that we want to make owning a car as easy as possible.
When you're in the middle of an automotive retail operation that covers more than 55 franchises across multiple states, it could become easy to get lost in the bigger picture, perhaps even losing track of the details. Just not at Flow Automotive. If there's a constant in the flow of business at Flow, it's that time never stands still and nothing's taken for granted. And definitely no detail is too small or an area overlooked. Whether it is technology or team building, infrastructure, or manufacturer relationships, the Flow Automotive ethic is all about continual improvement and relationship building on all fronts. That's what makes Flow so good. And it's part of the work ethic that extends from the family down. It's what Eric Flow lives by: getting better, reinventing, staying on top of industry trends, and trying to see the forest as well as the trees. Throughout the decades and through his growth in the industry, Eric has learned by watching his entrepreneurial father, Don, and now is exerting his own principles on the business. It's also what makes Flow so good, that seamless transition from one to the next. And in Eric's role as COO, he's continuing the tradition that started with his grandfather, staying progressive and developing customer loyalty at a deep level. He's optimistic on the year ahead and is always looking to adopt new technology and grow in areas of talent management. Today, he gives us his view on tech, the EV market, and the challenges of going back to basics in 2025, here on Full Throttle.
Hi, I'm Eric Flow, and this is Presidio's podcast, Full Throttle.
I always learn something when I'm around our next guest. He's always got a lot to share, lots of experience, and he's got his hands in all kinds of different places. What a pleasure to have you on Full Throttle. Eric, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Really appreciate everything that you do, Jason, and appreciate Presidio Group and you all's leadership in the market.
Thank you so much. Let's talk a little bit about the market. Here we sit, the year is underway. There are numerous questions that are floating in the air, but let's boil it down. What are you seeing and hearing at this point? How does your world look?
Yeah, thank you for asking. We think our consumer is really excited about 2025. Of course, we're in the Southeast, and so I think it's probably affected somewhat regionally, but we noticed sort of a change in, say, people appreciated the clarity post-November, regardless of which side of the political spectrum they were on. I think they wanted some clarity, and they got it. And we've seen a lot of positivity out of our consumer. I think, obviously, the market has some challenges to it. We came off of a year of 16.5, 16.8, I think it finished at, which is a really healthy year from a volume perspective. I think there's some of us that would prefer 16 million or 15.8 from a margin perspective. But if you think about the growth back over the last, post-COVID and then now, it's really healthy. There's a lot of pent up demand. We undersold the market by 10 million over a course of 3.5 years. So there's definitely some robust demand there. There's challenges as well. Interest rates, I think, are going to stay high for the foreseeable future. I don't think they're going to grow necessarily, but I'm not sure the Fed can be as aggressive with some rate cutting as people thought they were going to be. It's a little stubbornness, and we saw some of that month over month growth and in the print last week. I think tariffs are a big unknown for us, right? All of us see both merit in long-term increased competitiveness of the United States market. And at the same time, we know that there could be some short-term issues with some of our partners that we, sell cars from every single day, that source parts from around the world. And they're all going to have to work on their supply chains to figure that out. None of us know how much of that will come to fruition in the short term versus possibly as a negotiating tactic for the administration. So I think there's a little bit of up in the air there. I'm not sure. I think we as dealers think about it a little more than the average consumer. That makes sense. So, we're sort of game planning out some different scenarios. I would say the biggest thing that is a challenge in the market continues to be affordability. And of course, that's driven by interest rates, but that's also driven by the price of new cars, which has continued, has risen precipitously since 2019. And we've all seen the data that I think the average transaction price in 2019 was $33,000 and it peaked last year at $49,000 and it's come down some, but it's still high. I was talking about this recently. If you go to your local power sports store and you try to buy a side by side, it's 30 grand. I remember selling Civics for 19. So
Right,
you know,
right.
um, so you combine the expanding transaction price with higher interest rates, and you've got a difficult situation for a lot of people. And I think that's a real opportunity for someone to find that niche. It's just hard because the product planning cycle is so long. Even if they recognize that opportunity, can they make a car at a price point that's really affordable for the U.S. consumer? Can they, can they comply with safety and current emission regulations at a lower price point? Those are some things that are sort of up in the air that I hope some of our partners are really thinking on, because there's definitely a market opportunity there if somebody can figure out how to fill it.
It's funny you talk about the year and maybe a bit of a return to normalization to some extent, something that we've written about a lot lately.
Yep.
And when Mike Maroney was kind enough to ask both your dad and I to speak in front of his leadership group in early January, your father said that in your group, you had a heck of a December. You had a great
Yeah.
finish with some brands,
Yep.
which I think surprised everybody, didn't it?
Yeah. We had a great November and a great December. January was good for us. We had a little snow, which we're in North Carolina and Virginia, so our people aren't used to that the same way. And we've had a little snow in February along with some cold weather. But yeah, we had a very strong December. It seemed like people were really ready to kind of put, I think, some of the political uncertainty behind them and just get on with life. There's been so much noise in the marketplace
Right.
the last year.
Right. What has surprised you the most, maybe, about this pivot back to let's call it pre-COVID or 2019 or back to basics, whatever phrase you want to use for it? What has surprised you about that?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces to that. One is on the OEM side and one's on the dealer front. On the OEM side, you know, and I'm not going to name any names. We love all of our OEM partners, but you can tell the difference between the OEMs that really thought about, hey, what are things that we learned in COVID that went really, really well for us and for our dealers that we want to try to continue out, whether that's inventory, day supply, incentive structure that really, really worked well, versus people that were a little too aggressive with their day supply, aggressive with pushing MSRP, aggressive with really growing that price, that now they're in a difficult situation and they don't fully know how to roll back. And I get it. It's tough for them. And at the time they were trying to figure out how to maximize their opportunity. But I think it was somewhat of a short-sighted view. With the dealership side, I think, a lot of when you have a 2 to 10 day supply for 2 years,
Right.
and every car you have is going to sell. And even if you're selling it, I mean, we never sold cars over MSRP, but hey, we have a highly desirable model that's not pre-ordered. If you don't like it, the next person who's coming in an hour will. Would you like to buy it or not? It was the reality of the market for a long time.
Yeah, it was.
And I think dealers got away from their long practiced, their long-term practices of building relationships, building value in product, building value in processes, and selling vehicles, because there wasn't that level of competition. And if you're a growing organization and you have acquired stores in that time period and you've recruited young people into your organization, you have some people that never had to deal with a competitive market. I mean, we have some younger managers who are really, really good managers, really smart, and they had never really had to mystery shop other competitive dealers to see their pricing or, really work customers and leads the same way that all of us were used to doing for forever because the business just kind of came to them. And so getting back to some of those fundamentals and building value with customers is really important. And there's some organizations that plan for that and have been really proactive in that. And there's some organizations that over the last 6 months have kind of had to go, oh my gosh, we got to get back to the basics.
Yeah, amazing, right? Almost a portion of the staff hired during those times that needs to understand what life was like prior to.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I literally have had conversations with some of our younger managers. We have a program we call GMIT, General Manager and Training.
Hmm.
We hire college grads and take them through different, positions in the dealership and work them towards hopefully becoming a general manager in an organization. And some of the stuff that's basic blocking and tackling around the competitive nature of our industry, they just never had to do over the last
Yeah.
4 years. It was brand new for them. And so it's good skills for them to learn. And it's part of their development. But I think that surprised, even an organization like us that had really focused on it and planned for it, some of the people that surprised. So I think if you aren't geared that direction, the last 6, 7 months has been a bit of a crunch to you, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. You and I went back and forth privately around the time of the cyber attack last summer. You were sort of up to your eyeballs in alligators at that point, as I think to use maybe a phrase that you had used with me. What did all of that teach you about internally how preparedness matters, your own preparation, and maybe about the reliance on technology?
Yeah, so I would say we learned a lot of lessons. First and foremost, we continue to be grateful for the resiliency of our people. That was just amazing. Um, Similar to during COVID, I used to say during COVID, our people didn't sign up to be public health monitors.
Right,
Hey,
right.
do you have a fever today? Can you do this? Oh my gosh, Jimmy's uncle's brother got COVID and you were at a barbecue with them. Does that mean you're exposed? How much time? It was a lot of thinking that that's not what our people signed up to do in life, but they were willing to do it and they bound to, they came together and towards the greater mission and they all did it. Similar, very much so during, CDK outage of the summer where it was, hey, we're all going to get together. We're going to figure out how to make this work. Um, we're going to do everything we can to serve our customers. We're going to put our customers first. And even if that means staying late and doing manual paperwork and doing all these things, we figured out we can really do it. And it speaks to the robustness of our business, I think, and the robustness and the need that we feel in our economy for personal transportation. To the outside world, if we're explaining what we do, hey, we own car dealerships, we sell and service cars, and do body repair work. And we like to talk about how we do that because we want to enable transportation in our people's lives to accomplish, getting to work, getting to school, getting to soccer practice, going to church, seeing mom. That's the bigger, greater good. If we're talking internally about it, we talk about ourselves being personal transportation providers. And right now that's cars. Maybe someday that's eVTOLs or something like that. I don't know. But my dad has a saying that as long as people are flying through the air, until people are flying through the air with nothing on their back, there's something to sell, there's something to service, there's something to finance, there's something to repair, there's something to
Yes.
fix, right? And
Right.
so we have a role in that. It's just about having that mental model of being able to switch through that quickly. So we learned that the robustness of what we do is really strong. And we also learned, I think, as an industry that none of us are as prepared as we thought we were for a really big outage. I mean, I think some of us over the last few years, especially with the, FTC and other things, have really thought through cybersecurity in a way we hadn't before. But compared to other industries, compared to healthcare, compared to banking, compared to defense, compared to manufacturing, we probably hadn't thought about it the same way. And most of us had thought about it in terms of internally. So what happens if we have an internal cybersecurity event, not in terms of what if one of our major players major partners has a security event and we can't access our systems. What would that look like? How do we do it by hand? How do we replace those systems? How do you have redundant systems? And all of that on some level is friction, which is a tax, right? That creates cost in the system that doesn't provide immediate economic value. And so you sort of have to think about what's a new cost structure for you from an emergency preparedness. And we used to think about some of that cybersecurity and other parts of it, as sort of personnel or what we call it in the industry semi-fixed expense, right? But really, it's more like utility expense. It's fixed expense. It's rent. It's going to be there. It's never going away. And it's probably only going up over time. And we have to get serious about it in a way that we haven't been in the past. And I think that's a tough bullet to bite sometimes, but very, very necessary.
You're always considering and thinking about the next innovation and how to serve your customers, your guests, in a different way. How to meet them where they are, if you will. Things we've talked a lot about at our technology summit or our retail conference. What are you learning about yourselves in terms of how to meet those customers? How are you changing? What's the evolution there for Flow?
Yeah, so we think as we go back into a market, as we've been going back into the market of increasing price competition, we have to be even more transparent and more upfront with vehicle transaction prices. What's rebates? What are incentives? What's coming from Flow? What's the market price look like? I think the customer was used to that. And then they went through a period of several years where it was, well, this is the price of the car. Some of those people got terribly taken advantage of. And then, of course, because of the planning cycle, some of the people in market right now haven't bought a car since 2015. So they're used to that very competitive nature. And so we want to really, we've been very much getting back to the sort of we always had this transparency, but because the nature of the market, there wasn't as much discounting going on. There weren't those incentives. There weren't those rebates. So making sure we're communicating that information effectively and seamlessly in digital and physical worlds is really important. And making the ownership experience, I mean, we've been focused on this, and we've talked about this, Jason, with our app and some other things that we want to make owning car as easy as possible. When you think about how everything happens in a consumer's life outside of the auto industry, they pick up this thing, this tool. It's funny, somebody recently brought up to me that we call it a phone still, even though 10% of what you do is
Right.
call people on the phone.
Not a phone.
Right? It's not a phone. It's a computer with a phone app, but we still call it a phone, right? But everything else that our consumer does, they can do right here. You can apply for mortgages here. You can check your bank statement. You can send wires here. You can plan a trip here. You can fill out a mortgage application there. And our industry is behind in terms of empowering customers, right? And so that's why with our app strategy and our digital tool strategy, we've been really focused on putting power into our consumers' hands to interact with us digitally and efficiently. And I think of it, and we've said this before, but I always try to reiterate it. It's not because we think humans don't make a difference. We think humans really make a difference, but they only have to make a difference in some scenarios, right? So, hey, I need a book, an oil change, tire rotation, and alignment. Let's enable our customer to do that on the phone. Hey, I've got a noise, a clunk when I go around a corner, the check engine light's on, it's flashing. Is that an emergency? Or this is the second time X, Y, or Z happens. Yeah, you want to talk to a human for that service. And if we can self-direct some of the easier service work or inbound communication to empower customers to book those service events themselves, then that frees up our customer relationship center, which is what we call our BDC, because we want it focused on sort of that the customer viewpoint, not the business development viewpoint. But you can free up your BDC, you can free up your service advisor, you can free up your service manager to spend that extra time with the customers that really need that human engagement and that human involvement. So it's really, a strategy on all fronts of driving transparency in the market and in enabling customers and empowering customers.
A few final topics. Your current view of the buy sell market. Are you still in the market? You've just continued to expand over the years.
Yep. We are definitely still in the market. And, I think the market's really competitive. It's been competitive for a number of years. Some reality and valuation is starting to occur. Maybe not from a multiple standpoint. I mean, I think multiples are still on the higher end, although you see a big spread, right, between, I think, companies that have really great strategies around day supply and incentives and high quality product, and those that are a little less so. But it really around earnings, I think people are, there were a lot of people who, God bless them, they saw earnings really high. They had their shot. They wanted to exit the business and they went to go sell their companies, and good for them. They got top dollar over the last couple of years. As we see, volume coming back in the industry, margins coming down, and cost pressure coming in, those earnings are becoming a little more normalized. We've seen that data. You guys have published that data. Others in the industry have published that data. And so it's still higher than 2019 for sure, but it's a little more normal than it was 2 years ago. For us, we're strategic buyers. We believe in sort of going into markets and building out platforms that we call sort of localized scale. So we're always thinking about how do we grow market share in our markets, and then what are the other markets that are sort of next to our core markets that we want to continue to go in and build out. So I think it all depends on your strategy and how you're trying to grow and why you're trying to go as to what the value you place on that business, right? So I can place a different value on buying. If I were looking at the last luxury franchise in a city where I owned all the other luxury franchises, I'm going to put a different value on that than the individual who is coming from out of town just looking to buy. Hey, it's a great franchise in a good market and they want to go buy it. They think about the economic value they can create by owning that single franchise. I think about the economic value we can create by adding that into our portfolio when we have all the other options in town. And we really want to serve our customer holistically. So we say, hey, listen, it doesn't matter to us entirely what you're looking for. We want you to be thinking about buying your next car from Flow, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. EVs, how are your customers and guests thinking about EVs in your marketplace with all of the pendulum swinging that's gone on?
Yeah, totally. So we've talked about this for forever. And, to me, first, I want to say EVs are a blast to drive. Anybody who's ever driven them thinks they're a ton of fun. We're happy to sell them. There are some great products out there, and they are the right solution for some people. They just may not be the right solution for every person. And I think I've always said that I think the EV, the road, it's an evolution, not a revolution. And so, if you think about factors affecting EV demand and EV adoption, you kind of have mineral availability, mineral processing availability and capability, battery production, battery recycling, energy production, energy distribution, energy storage, endpoint charging, and sort of there's 10 or 11 steps we've mapped out. And we've kind of said, well, what are the structural impediments to achieving those? Because demand is just one part of it.
Right.
And you could have a lot of people who demand something, but if there's no ability to create the power or build the batteries or distribute the power, we talk about, for instance, there's been people talk about, hey, if we had 100 square miles of desert, we could have enough solar to create X amount of electricity. True. But if the desert's not close to the people who want to charge their cars, that's a problem. And power, dissipates over transmission distance. And so you got to transmit it, you got to store it. If everybody on your block wanted an EV, do you have the power lines that are capable of doing that? Would you have to relay power lines? What does it take to actually do that? What do the utility companies say it takes to do that? Sort of all of those factors affect it. And so for us, we think the market, and it's really regional, right? Like you go to California, and I think EV sales are 26% of the market now.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And they're 8.5% in North Carolina. And of the 8.5%, something like 6.5% is Tesla sales.
Right.
And so it's very regional. And I think, it's also in some parts of the world, some parts, we've seen really, we sort of think of it like intense but shallow demand. The people who wanted it really, really wanted it.
Yep.
There just weren't that many of them. Over time, I think two things. I think hybrid is a great solution for a lot of people that they're really opening up to that weren't open to that 10 years ago. And I also think in the long run, you'll see sort of um, mixed energy platform households where you have somebody who commutes 20 miles a day, really easy for them to have an EV. It's the right solution for them. And then somebody in the household has a nice car so that when they're taking the beach trip or the, the longer trip, they don't have to worry about the charging, or maybe they have kids and just the amount of battery life anxiety just doesn't work for them, right? And so I think you're going to end up in the long run with a lot of hybrids and then a lot of mixed households.
Yep. Eric, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. Always a ton to think about, and we've covered a lot of topics. But most importantly, I appreciate the partnership and the friendship and the places where you've given your time to speak at our events. And thank you for adding another one to the list here on the Full Throttle podcast.
Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you for all you do in this industry. Thank you for how you represent dealers and manufacturers in the broader industry. Appreciate you and your friendship, and really appreciate Presidio and all that you guys do. Thank you for the time today, and thank you for hosting and running the Full Throttle podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Bye.
That's the 41st episode of Full Throttle, and a special thanks to my guest, Eric Flow. Thanks for listening. For a library of these episodes with industry leaders, go to thepresidiogroup.com. I'm your host, Jason Stein. We'll talk to you again next time.